It's so hard for me to relate to a feeling of being afraid to try something because I love to try new things. But I will say the more that life has bitten me, the shyer that I do become. Like, I always joke with my dad because like whenever I'd ask him like, oh, how's this thing that you're drinking? How's your food? You know, he'd be like, it's not too offensive, it's good. And I'm like, that's the gold standard, it's not offending you? Like, you know, like people have like maybe a few different kinds of fear when it comes to approaching new food or drinks. Like one of them is fear to be disappointed. One of them is just like a fear of trying something new that they just have no reference for. You know, sometimes trying something new can pay off so well that like it opens up a new world for you. This restaurant came about in a really strange way. We opened in the middle of the pandemic, so even though it was a horrible time to maybe open a restaurant, I felt like it was like my only chance. The first goal with the food is just that when people eat it, they're like, oh wow, like this is so delicious. Even if it's not something that's like, this is a life-changing dish, just something that's like incredibly satisfying, even if it's sort of unassuming. Like a lot of our food, I think, looks pretty simple, even though there might be a lot behind it. When you tell people what your style is and what you are trying to do, then, you know, you automatically shut out all the other possibilities. I love to cook meat. I think I can always say that for sure, even if I don't know anything else. We cook with a lot of offcuts and just try to have fun with that. When I tell people that we get, you know, probably 98% of our meat from here, is just that like these pigs have a life that I would want to live.
Any restaurant can put themselves forward as being you know, a restaurant that sources locally, but it's very hard to actually do that week in and week out, year round, and not just like having specialty menu items that feature a farm here and there.
Sometimes when we receive cuts or when I cut into a piece of meat from here, I'm like, this literally looks like it's already cured. Like it's dark, it's really well marbled. Like it's just like this is like the same thing as looking at a piece of like really beautifully aged ham.
We love working with you because we can, if we're really heavy on a product, like if we have something that doesn't sell well, we can always send it to you as trim, and that's great. It's like a dream.
In this case, you sent us a bunch of pork sirloin roasts for our pate production.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody about how like, oh, like this junmai would be delicious with duck, blah, 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 blah. And then I was like talking to somebody who was prepping the pate and they were about to like grind all the sirloin roasts. So we saved a few aside and we roasted them like duck breast and just sliced it for a sandwich, and it was amazing. The flavor is so deep that like the meat can lend itself to many different applications. So that's like a way that like we called sake a team player before, because it's not like wine or beer, it's much more like rounding out a meal. I think that there is a really strong relationship between like sake production relying so heavily on high quality, locally sourced water, and like our existence as a restaurant relying on like high quality, locally sourced products. We wouldn't be the restaurant that we are if we weren't using all of this stuff from around here, because it just wouldn't taste the same. It is interesting to kind of have this and see its kind of quiet strength without the addition of brewer's alcohol. It has this sort of like rounder, fuller texture to it. When you think about fruit, you think sweet, but it's not, and it just has some of that kind of like fruit aroma to it, while at the same time having this sort of like mellow, savory quality. You have that sort of like almost sensation of like broth in your mouth. And so it has a lot of like personality, but it's also something that like doesn't need a lot of pomp and circumstance because it like already brings that on its own. The reason that it's like got that little pink hue is that it has a little bit of black rice added to the mash, and it adds a little bit of complexity, and also obviously it's just like really beautiful. This sake, I think, was said to be brewed with yeast that was extracted from strawberry flower and also Queen of the Night. What better pairing to have this sort of like idea between this sake, which represents these things and also just like has this really lovely, like subtle, but like a lot going on energy. And then like we're using pork that's raised, 20 minutes up the road in a place where we have both happiness and also the sort of rigor of like the tension between something that's beautiful and something that becomes very harsh. The way that the sake accentuates the flavor of the plum and the cheese with the plum and the pork with kind of the roundness of this sake is a really good match. Like it really kind of keeps all the flavors kind of circulating and coming back. The way that we approach cooking here, which is sort of just to keep things as simple as possible and only use the best ingredients and the necessary additions to make a dish perfect. There's definitely a parallel with this idea that the junmai that's produced at the Amabuki brewery is only just a few ingredients. Junmai actually literally translates to pure rice. It's sort of like not every food or drink needs to be an extrovert. As I go on, I feel like I understand and admire and respect people and things that have quiet power to them. People need to be more open to having things speak, and I think that's a really interesting idea of just like seasonality, something that you only get once, a crop that will never be the same, and all of this stuff, it all ties together in like a real true experience.